The battle raged on in the distant, war-torn city of Rillis, a place where the stars above seemed to weep for the bloodshed below. Kyle, a soldier from the Terran Alliance, stood tall among the ruins, his armor battered but still shining in the light of the twin suns. He wasn't here for glory, he was here for peace. The mission was simple: keep the fragile truce between warring alien factions alive for as long as possible. But peace was a distant dream, one that seemed further and further out of reach every time he stepped onto this cursed planet. His team had already seen too much, too many skirmishes, too many lives lost in senseless violence. Today, however, something felt different. Kyle couldn't quite put his finger on it, but it was a feeling that crawled under his skin, unsettling and urgent. The enemy had set an ambush. Without warning, blaster fire erupted from hidden positions on the high ground, striking down several members of his team. The rest of them dove for cover, returning fire as best they could. Kale's breath quickened, but his focus remained sharp. This was his life now. Constant battles, constant danger. Then, something caught his eye. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure moved with fluid grace. A woman, her form almost glowing amidst the debris. She moved like the wind, her long, flowing hair flicking through the air as she effortlessly cut down the attackers. Her movements were precise, every strike a testament to her skill, her strength, and her determination. Kale's pulse raced. He had never seen anyone fight like this. She was no ordinary fighter. There was something extraordinary about her, something that went beyond mere combat prowess. She was a force of nature, as deadly as the storm that raged overhead. He was so mesmerized by her that for a moment, he almost forgot the danger around him. But the sound of a spear slicing through the air snapped him back to reality. A soldier, from the enemy faction, taking advantage of her distraction, hurled a poisoned spear toward the woman. It flew fast, too fast for her to dodge. Kyle acted instinctively. Without thinking, he launched himself toward her, throwing his body in front of the spear. The sharp tip of the spear struck him in the side, the poison coursing through his veins before he could even react. Pain exploded in his chest, and for a moment, everything went black. Kale awoke to a cold, unfamiliar room. His head throbbed and his entire body felt heavy, as if the weight of the world had settled on him. He tried to sit up but found his strength drained, his movements slow and weak. He glanced around, the sterile walls of the room sending an unsettling chill through him. Where was he? What had happened? Before he could gather his thoughts, the sound of footsteps approached. The door slid open and there she was, the woman who had fought like no one Kyle had ever seen. Her eyes locked onto his, the same piercing gaze he had noticed in the heat of battle. "You're awake," she said, her voice calm yet filled with an unmistakable strength. There was something about her presence that felt regal. Kyle opened his mouth to speak but only managed a dry cough. His throat felt like sandpaper. She stepped closer, her movements graceful, almost ethereal. "You're lucky to be alive," she said softly. "I had to use every bit of my knowledge to save you." Kyle glanced down at the wound on his side. It was bandaged, but there was still a faint, greenish glow around the edges. The poison from the spear had been potent, far more deadly than anything he had encountered in his years of fighting. He cleared his throat, managing to speak at last. I'm not sure what happened. I remember the spear." Then everything went dark. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "The poison was designed to kill humans. It works quickly, but I've managed to neutralize it. For now." Kyle frowned, his mind racing. "You saved me?" "Yes," she replied simply, without hesitation. "I had no choice. The poison would have killed you, and I couldn't let that happen." Kale tried to push himself up again, this time managing to sit up. The pain was still there, but it wasn't unbearable. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since the battle, he noticed something strange. There was a quiet sadness in her gaze, a weight she carried with her that spoke of loss and untold stories. "I owe you my life," Kyle said, his voice sincere. But who are you? I've never seen anyone fight like that. She looked away. For a moment, her expression distant as if wrestling with her own thoughts. My name is Elara, she said at last, her tone softer. But that is not important right now. Kale wanted to press her further, to ask more about her, who she was, where she came from. But something told him now wasn't the time. There was an air of mystery about her, something that didn't quite fit with the harsh reality of the battlefield they had just left behind. You're not from here, are you? Kale asked. Elara's lips curled into a faint smile. No, I am not, and neither are you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Kyle didn't fully understand, but he could sense that there was much more to this woman than just her incredible combat skills. Something about her seemed out of place, as though she didn't belong in this world at all. Before Kale could say anything more, the door to the room opened again, and a small medical droid entered, humming softly as it went about its work. Elara took a step back, her eyes flicking toward the door. I'll let you rest, she said quietly. But there is much you don't know, Kale. Much that you will need to understand if we are to survive the coming days. As she turned to leave, Kale's thoughts swirled. He had a feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. But one thing was certain: he would never forget the woman who had saved him. Kale's mind raced with thoughts of the woman who had saved him. He lay in the quiet room, the soft hum of medical equipment the only sound breaking the silence. His body still ached from the poison, but the dull throb of pain was nothing compared to the mystery that Elara presented. There was something about her, something that didn't add up, and Kale was determined to find out what it was. As the hours passed, he drifted in and out of sleep, his dreams haunted by the image of Elara's piercing eyes, the way she moved in the battle, the way she had saved him without a second thought. What kind of person could do that? And why had she chosen to save him, a stranger to her, a soldier from a distant planet? His questions were answered sooner than he expected. The door to the room slid open and Elara entered once again, her presence as striking as ever. She had changed into a simple, yet elegant outfit that made her look even more out of place in this sterile modern world. The soft light from the nearby console bathed her in a soft glow, casting her in an almost otherworldly light. Feeling better? She asked, her voice gentle but firm. Kale nodded slowly, still a little weak but able. To sit up now? Yes, you saved my life. I owe you everything. Elara didn't respond right away. Instead, she moved to the side of the room, her back to Kale as she gazed out the small window. The faint stars twinkling in the distance seemed to match the uncertainty in her eyes. You don't owe me anything, she said after a long pause, her voice quieter now. It was the only choice I had. Kyle frowned. Why? Why did you choose to help me? I'm just a soldier. We've only just met. Elara turned to face him, her eyes searching his face as if she were deciding whether to trust him with something she'd hidden for too long. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Because, she began slowly, her words weighed down with unspoken truth. There's more to me than you think. Kale's curiosity was piqued. More to you? He repeated the words, unsure of where this conversation was going. What do you mean? Elara took a deep breath as if gathering her strength. She stepped closer to Kale, her movements graceful, and for the first time Kale saw the hint of vulnerability in her eyes. I'm not just a fighter, she said softly. I'm not just someone caught in this war. I'm the last of my people, the last of the Valorians. The words hit Kale like a sudden storm. He blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. The Valorians? He asked, trying to understand. But I've never heard of them. Elara nodded, her face shadowed with sadness. Most people haven't. Our civilization was destroyed long ago by the very enemies you were fighting against. The Valorians were once a powerful people, rulers of a vast empire that spanned many worlds. We were peaceful for the most part, but we were also a threat to those who sought power. She paused, her eyes distant as if lost in memories. Kyle's heart tightened, sensing that whatever had happened to her people had been more than just a war. It had been a tragedy. We were betrayed, Alara continued, her voice low. The enemies we thought we could trust, they turned on us. The Valorians were wiped out in a single devastating blow. Almost all of us perished that day. I was only a child when it happened, and my people tried to keep me hidden, to protect me. But it was no use. I was the last. Kale sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. He could feel the sorrow radiating from her, a pain so deep that it seemed to pulse through the air itself. Alara, the woman who had saved him, was the last of a once great civilization, the sole survivor of an extinction that had left her alone in a galaxy that had forgotten her people. I never asked for this, Alara said, her voice breaking for the first time. I never wanted to be the last. I wanted to forget the past, to live a quiet life far away from the pain and the memories. But there's no escaping it. My people's enemies, they're still out there hunting me. They think I'm the key to something they can use to control the power my people once held. Kale could hear the fear in her voice, the fear of what her survival meant. It wasn't just a personal burden. It was a responsibility that she could never escape. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to carry that weight alone, to know that the entire fate of her people's legacy rested on her shoulders. I didn't save you because of some duty, she said, meeting his gaze. I saved you because I needed you. I can't do this alone. I've been running, hiding for so long, but now I need someone who can help me fight back, someone who will understand. I can't do this on my own, Kyle. Kyle sat there, the gravity of her words sinking in. He had never expected any of this. Alara wasn't just another soldier or fighter. She was a princess, the last of a dying race, carrying the weight of her people's past and their future in her hands. And for the first time in a long while, Kale understood something about himself, something deeper than just his duty as a soldier. He wasn't just here to fight. He was here to protect her, to stand by her whatever the cost. I don't know what's ahead, Kyle said quietly, his voice steady. But I'm with you, Alara. I'll help you, no matter what. Alara looked at him, her expression unreadable, for a moment. Then a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, and Kale realized that this wasn't just the end of their conversation. It was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them had anticipated. The next few days passed in a blur. Kale's body recovered, but his mind remained focused on Alara and the mysterious weight of her words. The quiet, sterile room they were in seemed to press in on him, reminding him of the danger they were, both in. He had never felt the pull of a cause so strongly before. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting someone who carried the fate of an entire race, someone who needed him. Alara, on the other hand, was distant. She moved through the facility with purpose, but Kyle could see the strain in her eyes. The sadness that she had tried to hide was impossible to ignore now. She was alone in the world, the last of her people, and every day she had to fight not only for survival, but for a future she wasn't sure she wanted. Yet, she continued, knowing that her survival meant something far more significant than herself. Kale could sense the storm coming. Her enemies, whoever they were out there, and they would stop at nothing to find her. And then, one morning, the storm arrived. The quiet was shattered by the harsh buzz of an alarm. Kyle leapt to his feet, instinctively reaching for his gear, the sudden adrenaline rush waking him from his thoughts. Alara had been standing by the window when the alarm sounded, and she turned to him, her face a mix of calm and concern. "They've found us," she said quietly. Before Kale could respond, the door to their room burst open, and two armed guards rushed in, their faces tight with fear. "We need to move now," one of them said urgently. Alara didn't hesitate. Without a word, she grabbed Kale's arm and pulled him towards the door. The guards led them down narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The facility was under lockdown, and everything felt more urgent than ever. As they moved, Kale's mind raced. Who were these enemies? And why were they so determined to capture Elara? The guards stopped at a narrow exit, a hatch leading out into the open sky. Outside, the world looked peaceful, almost serene, with no sign of the chaos that had begun to unfold inside the facility. Elara's voice was low, but there was steel behind it. "Get to the ship. I'll explain everything once we're safe." Kale nodded, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his blaster. He trusted her, but he could feel the tension building. There was no turning back now. They were about to face something far bigger than they could have imagined. The ship was a sleek, dark vessel that seemed to blend into the night sky. As they boarded, Elara took the controls, her hands moving with practiced ease. Kyle sat in the co-pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the monitors. The peaceful landscape below them faded as they took off, soaring into the vastness of space. Once they were clear of the planet's atmosphere, Elara finally spoke. Her voice was strained, but there was a fire behind it. "They are the Drachkale," she said, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "A faction of merciless conquerors who destroyed my people." Kyle frowned, the name unfamiliar to him. "And what do they want with you?" "They believe I'm the key to unlocking the full power of the Valorian civilization," Elara replied, her voice tight. "I'm the last of my kind, and they want to use my blood, my DNA, to revive the weapons my people once had. They think that by controlling me, they can rule the galaxy." Kale's fists clenched. The thought of anyone using Elara, using her as a tool for power, sickened him. He didn't know much about her people, but he knew enough to understand the pain of watching a civilization fall, of losing everything that had once been great. The idea that she was being hunted for something she had no control over only made him more determined to protect her. "We won't let them have you," Kale said, his voice low but firm. Elara's gaze softened for a brief moment, but she quickly masked it with a determined look. "You don't understand. They won't stop. The Drachkale are relentless, and worse, there are others who want me too. There are factions who think that if they get their hands on me, they can control the legacy of the Valorians. There are too many enemies." Kyle's mind raced as he processed her words. It was clear that Elara's survival wasn't just about keeping her alive. It was about protecting the very future of the galaxy. Her enemies weren't just after her, they were after the power she represented. "Then we'll fight," Kale said with certainty, his voice unwavering. "I've fought wars before, Elara. I know what it takes. We'll make sure they never get their hands on you." Elara glanced at him, her expression unreadable before nodding. "You don't know what you're getting into, Kale. The Drachkale are like nothing you've faced before. They don't just fight, they erase. They don't stop until they've destroyed everything in their path." Kyle leaned back in his seat, considering her words. He didn't fully understand the danger they were facing, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't backing down. Elara had saved his life, and now he would do everything in his power to ensure she didn't lose hers. As the stars stretched out before them, Elara's ship hummed steadily, but Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something told him that the Drachkale were already on their trail, and time was running out. The days blurred together as Kale and Elara traveled through space, their destination unknown to all but Elara. The ship they flew was fast, sleek, and unmarked, allowing them to avoid detection for now. Elara kept the ship on the move, jumping from one safe zone to the next, constantly monitoring the radar for any signs of pursuit. But even in the quiet moments, Kyle could feel the tension rising. The calm before the storm was always the hardest part. Kyle didn't mind the silence, though. In the stillness, he found time to think about Elara, her people, and the looming threat of the Drachkale. He could only imagine what it must be like to carry the weight of an entire civilization's history and future on your shoulders. It was a burden he couldn't fully comprehend, but he was determined to help her carry it. Elara, for her part, was distant at times, lost in her own thoughts, but she never let down her guard. She was a woman of action, not one to dwell on the past, though Kale could see the occasional flicker of grief in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. It was clear that the loss of her people haunted her, even if she tried to hide it. One evening, after a long day of travel through uncharted space, they decided to rest. The ship was docked on a small, barren moon, a temporary stop to rest and refuel. The moon was quiet, its surface untouched by any sign of civilization. It was the perfect place to lay low for a while. Kyle stood on the small observation deck, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. The stars seemed distant, far, beyond his reach, just like the peace he wished for. He had never been one for quiet, but now it felt like a momentary escape from the chaos they were racing toward. Suddenly, the door behind him slid open. He turned to see Alara standing in the doorway, her face serious, though there was a hint of something else there, something Kale couldn't quite place. "I need to speak with you," she said, her tone sharp. Kale nodded and stepped aside, allowing her into the room. "What's going on?" Alara's eyes narrowed as she glanced at him. "I've been thinking. The Dra Kale are dangerous, but they're not the only threat we have to worry about. We have allies, but they're not as reliable as I'd hoped. There are those among us who might not be as loyal as they seem." Kale frowned. "What do you mean?" Alara crossed the room, her eyes dark with concern. "There's a traitor among us, someone who has been leaking information to the Drakyle. I don't know who it is yet, but I can feel it. I trust you, Kale. I need you to watch our crew." Kale's heart sank. The thought of betrayal, especially in their current situation, was the last thing he wanted. But Alara's instincts had never been wrong before, and he knew she wasn't one to make accusations lightly. "I'll keep an eye on them," Kale said, his voice firm. "Who do you think it could be?" "I don't know," Alara replied, shaking her head. "But someone's been feeding them information. The Drakale always seem to know where we are, even when we're in the most remote sectors. We've been compromised." Kyle clenched his fists. This was exactly what they didn't need, a traitor in their midst. With the Drakyle already hunting them, they couldn't afford to have someone working against them from the inside. "I'll figure this out," Kyle said, his tone determined. "No one betrays us, not while I'm here." Alara gave him a grateful look. "I know. But be careful. Trust no one. Not even those you think you know. We're all in danger now." The weight of her words hung in the air. Kyle could feel the tension rising once again. He had already known their situation was dire, but now the stakes were even higher. A traitor could destroy everything they had worked for, everything they were fighting for. The following days were filled with quiet suspicion. Kale watched everyone on the crew carefully, noting every small detail, every glance, every whisper. It wasn't easy. The crew was a mix of seasoned soldiers and mercenaries, all of whom had their own reasons for being there. But now, in the midst of all the uncertainty, Kyle felt the distance between them grow. The camaraderie they had once shared had vanished, replaced by distrust. Kale's eyes narrowed as he observed the interactions between the crew members. There was always someone standing a little too close to the communication system, or lingering a bit too long over maps and data feeds. And then there were the quiet, suspicious meetings held behind closed doors, meetings that Kale had never been invited to. One evening, while everyone else was gathered in the common area, Kale slipped away and made his way to the communications room. He had a hunch, one that he couldn't shake. As he approached, he heard voices from within. He hesitated for a moment, his hand on the door, before he slowly pushed it open. Inside, he found one of the crew members, Jarek, a seasoned mercenary who had joined their team just a few days before, standing at the console, his fingers flying over the controls. Jarek froze when he saw Kyle in the doorway, his eyes widening for a brief moment before he quickly tried to hide what he had been doing. "What are you doing?" Kyle asked, his voice cold. Jarek's hand dropped away from the console, and he turned to face Kale, his expression guarded. Just checking the systems. Making sure everything's running smoothly." Kale didn't buy it. He stepped into the room, his eyes narrowing as he moved closer to the console. He could see the data streams running, the encryption codes. None of it looked normal. This wasn't routine maintenance. "You've been sending messages," Kale said, his voice low. Jarek swallowed hard, and for a moment Cale saw fear flash across his face. The mercenary knew he had been caught. I'm not the one you think I am, Jarek stammered. I didn't mean for this to happen, but they threatened my family. I had no choice. Please, Cale, you don't understand. Cale's hand shot out, grabbing Jarek by the collar and slamming him against the wall. You're the traitor, Cale growled. You've been feeding information to the Drakyle, haven't you? Jarek struggled for a moment, his breath shallow. Yes, he admitted, his voice breaking. But it wasn't supposed to go this far. They promised me they would spare my family. I didn't know what else to do. Please, Cale. Kyle's grip tightened. Betrayal wasn't just a personal attack. It was a death sentence for everyone. I'll deal with you later, Cale said, his voice a low growl. For now, you're staying locked up. The tension aboard the ship had only grown since Cale had discovered Jarek's betrayal. Locked away in the brig, Jarek had begged for mercy, but Cale was unmoved. He knew that the traitor was just the beginning. With the Drakyle closing in, there was no time to waste. They couldn't afford any more distractions or weaknesses within their ranks. The crew was now on edge, unsure who to trust. Ilara, however, had remained calm through it all. She had known the risks of their journey, knew that every moment was a gamble. But even she couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. The Drakyle weren't just a merciless force of destruction. They were smart, calculating, and relentless. If they had managed to track them this far, it wouldn't be long before they found a way to catch up. Ilara was in the ship's command room, monitoring the systems when Kaele walked in. He had just finished securing Jarek, but his mind was still troubled. The traitor was a small part of the puzzle, but the real threat was what lay ahead. We need to make a stop, Ilara said without looking up. There's a place where we can hide. It's a derelict space station on the edge of the Trillian Nebula. We can regroup, plan our next move, but we'll have to make it quickly. Kyle nodded. How long do we have? Not long. We've been on the move for too long. They'll be getting close, and we can't outrun them forever. The sound of the ship's engines hummed steadily beneath their feet, and Kyle's fingers tapped rhythmically against the console. The silence between them felt heavy, but there was a sense of understanding between them now, an unspoken bond that had grown stronger in the face of everything they had endured. We can make it, Cale said, his voice firm. I won't let them get to you, Ilara. Not while I'm still breathing. Ilara glanced at him, her eyes sharp and focused. I know you won't, but we both know that the Drakyle aren't just after me. They want what I can unlock, and if they get their hands on me, they'll destroy everything. Cale's stomach churned at the thought. The fate of Ilara's people, her legacy, was tied to something far greater than any of them could fully understand, and if the Drakyle succeeded, the galaxy would be thrown into chaos. We'll stop them, Cale said, his voice unwavering. We'll make sure they never get that power. The journey to the derelict space station was a quiet one, but it was filled with a nervous energy. The crew had gathered in the ship's mess hall, and Cale noticed the way they moved, always, with a watchful eye, constantly scanning for danger. The betrayal had shaken them all, but now they needed to focus. As the ship approached the station, the silence in the control room was palpable. Ilara's fingers moved swiftly over the controls, and Cale stood behind her watching the radar. The Trillian Nebula loomed ahead, its gaseous clouds swirling with vibrant colors that seemed to dance across the dark void. The space station was nothing more than a forgotten relic of a past age. Abandoned for decades, its hulking structure floated in the midst of the nebula, dark and eerie, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. It was the perfect hiding place, isolated, hidden from the prying eyes of enemy ships. Ilara's voice broke through the silence. We'll dock in the main hangar. Stay alert. We don't know what we might find inside. Cale nodded, his senses sharp. The ship's engines powered down as they neared the station, and the soft hum of the docking clamps filled the air. The lights in the control room flickered for a moment, casting shadows on the walls, but everything seemed stable. When the hatch finally opened, the cold, metallic scent of the station filled Cale's nostrils. The place was ancient, the walls covered in grime and rust. The silence was deafening. They were alone. For now. "Let's move," Cale said, his voice low but urgent. Alara led the way, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Cale stayed close behind her, his hand resting on the hilt of his blaster, ready for whatever dangers might be waiting. The station was large, its corridors twisting and turning in confusing patterns. The dim, flickering lights cast long shadows on the walls, and the sound of their boots on the cold metal floor seemed to carry for miles. They had been walking for only a few minutes when they heard it. A distant sound, like a low hum. It wasn't the station's usual creaks and groans, this was something else. Something alive. Kyle's hand instinctively went to his weapon, and Alara's eyes narrowed, her sharp senses on high alert. "We're not alone," she said, her voice tight with tension. Before Cale could respond, a figure appeared in the hallway ahead of them. It was a man, dressed in a ragged uniform, his face obscured by a mask. He didn't move toward them, but his posture was tense as though he was waiting for something. Alara stepped forward, her voice steady. "Who are you?" The man's voice was muffled through the mask, but his words were clear. "I'm not here to hurt you, but you need to leave this place. The Drakal know you're here." Cale's pulse quickened. "How do you know that?" The man stepped closer, his mask reflecting the dim light. "I've been tracking them for years. I'm a former member of the Valorian resistance, and I'm here to help you." Alara froze, her eyes narrowing. "The Valorian resistance? How do I know I can trust you?" The man lowered his mask, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange. An older man, but his features were unmistakable. He looked like he could be a distant relative of Alara, though much older. "I knew your father," the man said quietly. "I fought alongside him, and now I'm here to make sure the Drakal never get their hands on you." Alara's eyes widened. "You knew my father?" The man nodded. "Yes, and I can help you, but we don't have much time. The Drakal are on their way." The man's revelation hit Alara like a thunderclap. The resistance, her father, everything she had thought she knew was suddenly in question. She stood motionless, her gaze locked on the stranger who claimed to have fought alongside her father, a man she had only heard of in stories and whispers. "I don't understand," Alara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father, he died. My people—" She paused, the weight of her words heavy in the air. "They're all gone." The older man stepped closer, his eyes filled with sadness and understanding. "I know, child, I know, but not everything is as it seems. Your father fought until the very end, and he left a plan, a way to stop the Drakal. You're the key to that plan, Alara." Cale, who had been standing in the shadows, listening intently, took a step forward. "What do you mean? How can she stop them? They're relentless. No one can defeat them." The man's eyes shifted to Cale. "You don't understand, soldier. The Drakal aren't just after Alara. They're after something far more dangerous. They think that by using her bloodline they can unlock the weapons and technology her people once had. But her father hid the true power. And Alara? She's the only one who can unlock it." Alara shook her head, confusion and fear gripping her. "I don't want to be the weapon they use to destroy everything. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be the last of my people." The man placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. "I know, Alara, but sometimes we don't choose our path. The path chooses us, and you are the last hope of the Valorians. Without you, the galaxy will fall into chaos." Cale stepped closer to Alara, his hand resting gently on her arm. He could feel the tension radiating off her, the burden of the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. She had already lost everything, her people, her home, her future. Now she was being asked to become something even greater, something she had never wanted to be. "Whatever it takes, Alara," Cale said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I'll be with you. You don't have to face this alone." Alara looked up at him, her eyes filled with doubt and fear. For a moment she looked as if she might break under the weight of it all. But then, Something changed in her eyes. A spark of determination, of defiance, flickered deep within her. She turned to the older man. "What do I need to do? If there's a way to stop them, then I have to try. I can't let them win." The man smiled, though it was a sad, weary smile. "You've already made the hardest choice, Elara. Now we need to get to the heart of the Drakhail's stronghold. There you will find the key to unlocking the power that your father hid. But be warned, the journey will not be easy. The Drakhail will stop at nothing to keep you from reaching it." Elara nodded, her jaw set with resolve. "Then we'll do whatever it takes to reach it. We can't let them have it." Kale squeezed her arm, his presence a steadying force beside her. "We're in this together, Elara. We won't let them destroy what's left of your people." They spent the next few hours preparing for the final push. Elara's mind raced, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her like an endless storm. She wasn't ready for this. She hadn't been ready for any of it. But the Drakhail were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. She had no choice but to fight back. The older man, who had introduced himself as Commander Rylas, had given them coordinates for a secret base on a desolate moon. There, Elara could unlock the power her father had hidden away before his death. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The Drakhail were relentless, and they would have eyes on every corner of space. As they boarded the ship, Kale could see the uncertainty in Elara's eyes, but he also saw something else. A flicker of hope, however small. It was buried deep beneath her grief, but it was there, and that was enough for now. "Are you ready?" Kyle asked softly. Elara nodded, her voice steady. "I have no other choice. We have to stop them." The ship hummed to life as they prepared for their final journey. The stars stretched out before them, endless and vast, and for the first time, Kyle felt the true weight of their mission. This wasn't just about saving Elara. It was about saving everything. The galaxy's future rested in their hands. As they made their way toward the Drakhail stronghold, Kyle kept his focus on Elara. She was no longer the frightened woman he had met on that battlefield. She had grown, transformed by the trials she had faced. She was no longer just the last princess of her people. She was the hope of the galaxy, and no matter what happened next, Kyle would be there, fighting by her side. The journey was long, but there was no turning back now. The Drakhail were closing in, but Elara's resolve was stronger than ever. She had chosen her path, and she would see it through to the end, with Kale and the last remnants of her people at her side. The galaxy's fate was about to be decided. The final choice had been made.